Mark, awesome to connect with you. Welcome to the Happy Engineer podcast, man.
Thanks for having me on the show. It's my pleasure to be here.
Mark, we're going to talk about a lot of really important career topics today. You have a tremendous book, The Career Toolkit. I found 1,000 questions that we could ask and explore today, and I'm pumped to dig into it. In the process of exploring you, there was something that I could not resist starting with today. And to take you there, I want you to go back with me to 2005. This is my personal story here. 2005. I am in Columbus, Ohio, at an event known as the Ohio Star Ball, competing in ballroom dance with my partner from Purdue University, and toe to toe, literally on the dance floor, with some amazing dancers from all over the country and world. And it was the first time I had ever made it to the final round of 6 in the silver level syllabus there at the Ohio Star Ball. And really excited, did my final rounds, and placed well, but never first, because there was a couple from MIT that swept first place in every dance at that event. And as I was looking at your background, I couldn't help but see ballroom dance. And I went looking and I was like, no way. Mark was an MIT ballroom dancer, I think at a different time. But I want you to tell me about your dance days, because this is so rare that somebody has the same background in collegiate competitive dance that I have. So how did that begin? How far did you take it? What was your favorite dance? Like, just talk to us about ballroom for a minute.
Ballroom actually is very appealing to engineers because it is a very structured dance.
Yeah.
Left foot forward on 1, 3/4 turn clockwise on 2. It's so structured. I think that's why it appeals to lots of engineers. Obviously at MIT, most of us were engineers or scientists, but even in our peer schools at Harvard, at Brown, I saw a lot of engineers were on the ballroom team. And now most people don't know this. MIT has, or at least back then had, arguably one of the top, if not the top, ballroom dance team in the country.
Yep.
It's non-NCAA sports, so there wasn't exactly a head-to-head, but we produced a lot of great dancers and some national champions.
Yeah, that's super true. Purdue was always like, that was the school we wanted to beat. Anytime we would go to an event, MIT was the bar set in terms of who really, really competed well. So was this like all 4 years of your undergrad, you were a dancer, or tell us a little bit about that?
The short version of how I got into it was senior year. A friend of mine set me up with a girl for one of our semi-formals.
Okay.
And we had a good date. And I thought, okay, well, now we're going to do things. It was MIT's intersession after that. We got set up at the end of the semester. MIT's January intersession. Thought, okay, what's a fun thing for us to do together? And here is this activity during the intersession. There's a whole bunch of things that go on, including ballroom dance lessons. I thought, here's a great activity.
It's
boys
perfect.
and girls. It's on campus. It's close. It was pretty cheap, important back then. So we did the ballroom dancing. We only did it a few weeks. We're still friends. But I got hooked. I got into it. And so I started going regularly. I didn't join the team until 2 years later. So I stayed for my master's degree at MIT.
Oh, okay.
I didn't join the team until my then girlfriend, I got her into ballroom, and she decided she wanted to join the team, which apparently meant I had also made the decision.
Right. Decision made.
And because it's not an NCAA sport, it was open to students, grad students, faculty, staff,
Right.
alumni. So I was able to stay with it. In fact, I was last at Ohio Star Ball, I think in 2003. So we may have
we missed.
overlapped a little in kind of my last year or so. When I moved to New York, unfortunately, I couldn't find a partner and I just retired from competitions.
Oh, man. That's amazing. Well, my first Ohio Star Ball was 2004. So we just missed in competitive dance. But I love the story, and mine is very similar. The reason I got into ballroom was a girl named Monica. We weren't even dating, but I just was like, walking down the corridors at Purdue with a group of friends. Monica was one of them, and we passed a sign that said ballroom dance call out, and she was like, "Oh, we got to go do this." And of course, everybody said, "Sure, sure, sure." And then in the end, it ended up being only me and Monica who showed up for the call out. And next thing you know, I'm a competitive dancer. Who saw that coming? Too funny. What was your favorite dance, Mark? Do you have one that really stood out?
American Foxtrot.
Ooh.
And I have to say, the first time I ever took first place, it was at the Brown competition, my second year of dancing as a silver level dancer. And I remember we were doing well. And right before the finals, one of the coaches said, "Hey, this move you're doing, you can't do it," because in ballroom dance, you have bronze, silver, gold, and there are certain steps you're allowed at each. We said, "No, Arthur Murray told us this is an allowed silver step." You're like, "No, I know their syllabus. You're not allowed." And so we had to scrap our routine and just do the basic step, the one basic step over and over. I remember being so pissed, but somehow that anger energy went into doing the basic, and we took first. And that
No
really
way.
floored me. And that's
too
actually a
funny.
good lesson that sometimes I was so angry, like this is going to kill it. And oh, you're ruining my competition. But what might feel like a setback can turn into a benefit, and don't let your emotions or anger take you over. You don't know the outcome
Yes.
until you've gone through it. And so I
Yes.
learned from that, I'm going to have these setbacks, whether it's difficult customers or here's a new constraint thrown on the project. Okay, let's deal with it because I could still wind up with a positive outcome at the end.
It's a great lesson. And there's so many amazing parallels between dance and engineering, dance and career, dance and life that we could pull. Maybe another one of those metaphors we'll tease out here in our chat. But so Mark, you get out of MIT, you have this incredible engineering pedigree, and at some point in the journey, you got into this idea, hey, I need to pull this all together into a concise body of knowledge around career success that isn't taught in school. And I want to actually pick your brain first on why do you think that is? Why is it that the things we need beyond our engineering degree to actually create a successful career isn't really taught anywhere?
You have to look at the evolution of education. High school education, and really primary and secondary education, came out of moving us from the farms into the factories. Because when you go back 200 years, well, boys learned what their dads did on the farm and girls learned what their moms did. And yes, that's very sexist, but that's what the world was like 200 years ago. You just learn from your parents.
Yeah.
But when we moved into the factories, we needed reading, writing, and arithmetic. You had to read the sign saying, "Do not touch the spinning saw." You had to know how to count how many screws you have in the box. So we had to create a basic level of education for people to function in the more modern industrial society. And that's what really primary and secondary school is designed for. Now we've added in, oh, you should learn a language and you should learn some history and some other things, but it's just there for that function. Now, higher education actually goes back about 900 years. That's the university system.
Okay.
And the university system, it's run by a bunch of professors. Very nice people, don't always know much about the world. If you think about your professors, your professor had a PhD in mechanical engineering, and he could explain the heat cycle of all sorts of different processes. And that's what he's an expert in. In fact, to get that role, he became more and more narrow the further he went. And what they've said, these experts in mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, whatever, they said, well, if you want to be an engineer, you need to take these classes, some introductory ones. We'll throw in some math and science, some intermediate. And if you take all these classes, we're going to give you a piece of paper saying you have an understanding of engineering.
Yes.
We're not saying you're a good engineer. We're certainly not saying you're a good employee. We're just saying you have this knowledge. And when you go back to mid 20th century, that was sufficient because we sat there and was told, make this wheel fit in this box.
Yes.
Okay, work it out. Here you go, sir. What next? Oh, make that triangle fit in the box. Okay. We didn't have to worry about all these other people, the accountants and the salespeople and all these people we had to talk with. Nowadays, you have people like me as a CTO, and I'm saying, hey, we need to integrate with this new social media tool that I hadn't heard of until last week. but you, the 23-year-old, have been using it for the past 2 years. You know more than I do about this problem. And so it's a different set of skills. Instead of I command you to solve some problems in that hierarchy, it's we need to come together to solve new types of problems. And that's a different type of skill set
Yes.
than what we've done in the past. And our education system hasn't caught up to it.
Really good perspective, Mark. And I want to highlight what you just said a moment ago, that I agree with 1,000%, that the original design of the degree, mine in mechanical engineering, you have 100 degrees, Mark, physics and electrical and computer science and all the things that you've done. There was never an intent for that piece of paper to represent you will be a fantastically successful engineer in a company in your career. It represents a level of validation that you have mastered a body of knowledge. That's what it is. And this idea that having a 4.0 at Purdue is going to automatically translate to fantastic performance at Whirlpool Corporation in my career, like, where did we come up with that notion? And even more so, I see a lot of my clients who are struggling with their career, Mark. They're at a certain level and they can't seem to break through to the next level. And their default answer to that is to go back to school and get a master's degree in engineering. And it's like, wait a minute. It's a complete backward mindset that the knowledge of that wasn't ever intended to help you become a senior manager or a director. It's not about breaking through to that next level. So I guess from your experience with this, what is it that needs to change in the mindset of an individual first to get onto the path of my career success takes a different skill set than my engineering skill set or knowledge? Where does that shift begin?
I'm going to say there's two basic categories, or maybe three. Let's start with two. The first, if you think about how we're taught in school, the professor says, here's a problem set, or here's a test. There's a bunch of questions. Now, first, everything you need to answer the question is in there. They didn't forget to tell you what's the angle of the inclined plane. Like, the angle's 42. Okay, great. I needed to know that to calculate the velocity at the bottom of the plane. They tell you everything you need to know, and then your job is to apply what you've learned. Hint, it's what you did in class last week or last month.
Yes.
And then put the answer in that little box. And if you put more right answers in more boxes than the other person, you're a better student. The real world's not like that. Your boss doesn't say, here's everything you need to know about the problem. Now you just sit there and do the math, the one I taught you last week, and put the answer in the box. Your boss says, hey, we got this need. Solve it.
Go figure it out.
You don't necessarily have all the information. You don't know what the right model is or formula you need to use. And there's not a clear box. Is the answer 42? Or is the answer, here's a PowerPoint presentation? Or is it, now we have to go convince the finance department this project should be funded? Those are different answers that need to be presented different ways. And we never do that type of problem solving when we learn in school. We finally in school only just recently started to say, hey, you're going to do collaborative projects because it turns out you don't engineer alone. So work with other people. Okay, good. But there's so much more. That's the first mental shift. It's not putting answers in boxes, which is how we teach. The other is that there is a common set of skills that we see over and over. And we see it in surveys that MIT and other universities have done of employers. We see it in surveys that companies like McKinsey and other places do of companies as well. And we see these 10 skills keep coming up. Skills you've heard of: networking, negotiating, leadership, team building, communication. If you think about it, networking, you've heard this before. You've heard it many times. I was hearing it as a kid. Everyone, my teachers, my parents, networking is so important. When did anyone actually teach me how to network? You kept saying important. No one stopped to teach me.
Yeah.
So we've known what's important. We just didn't emphasize it.
I know today we're not going to get through all 10 of those or so much of the content in your book. I do want to pause and just encourage the happy engineer out there listening. Go grab a copy of the Career Toolkit. There'll be a link in the show notes. Mark's book is fantastic. But Mark, knowing where we're at right now in history, maybe to pull this into what people are experiencing in their careers. Here we're recording in December of 2022. We just spent the last 2, 3 years in this COVID-19 era. And now we're staring down the barrel of what some people would consider a pretty potentially deep recessionary pressure. We'll see what ends up actually happening. But a lot of announcements have happened in the last couple of months around big organizations cutting down the workforce. A lot of engineers have been furloughed or laid off recently. So what would you say if you were going to pick the skill sets that matter the most in career success right now in the face of a recessionary pressure or things going on in the world? Are they different than other times? Are they the same? What would you point someone to if you're only going to focus on growth in one or two areas? Where would you encourage people to aim that energy?
First, I got to push back a little. I don't think there is a major recession coming, maybe a minor one. But in fact, if you look at the numbers, and in a recent blog post, so when you go to my website, you can read blog posts. A recent one I said, don't worry about this, because even though we've seen the headlines in my field in software, Facebook's laying off and Twitter's laying off,
Yes.
when you actually look at the numbers, we're really not that different from other years. It's just that we're so not used to seeing big tech do layoffs that it's made headline news.
Yeah.
But when you actually crunch the numbers, we're pretty typical compared to most years. Yeah, maybe a little more layoffs this year than some other, but we are so close to the mean. We're not even one sigma out, let alone two.
Sure.
So
that's really good data. I'm glad you shared that. And I guess taking the traditional definition of GDP contraction, we might use that data as one point, but this is a really important data set too, to look at actual job creation or elimination versus prior years. I love that. So thank you. I love a good encouraging message that, hey, don't forget all models are wrong, right? Some are useful. So that's a really good reminder. So that context said, continue.
In terms of the skills, I wouldn't say any one is particularly stronger than another. Perhaps as your job is searching, networking is going to be slightly more useful in the short term.
Yeah.
But let me give you, here's some basic math to help you understand the importance of these skills. And this is one, I always do this, and I worry, well, am I doing too much math for people? But not with this group.
Oh, you can go as nerdy as you want with the math, Mark. Let's go deep, man. If there's calculus, I might be a little rusty. It's been a few minutes, but let's do it.
We're going to do basic addition, maybe a little compounding here.
Okay, we can handle it.
Imagine you are a 25-year-old engineer, and you've got a job offer for $80,000. But instead of taking the job as it is, you've learned to negotiate. Maybe you learned it from my book. Maybe you learned it in a different book, online class, doesn't matter. You spent a little time, you learned to negotiate. You're not the world's best negotiator, but you're a little better than you were. So instead of just taking the job at $80,000, you negotiate for $1,000 more, $81,000. That's doable. That takes 5-10 minutes of speaking on the phone or a couple emails. If you do nothing else in your career, if you stay in that job for 40 more years until you retire, 10 minutes of effort just got you $1,000 more for 40 years. You made $40,000 with 10 minutes of effort. But of course, you're saying there's no way I'm sticking in that job for 40 years. You have other promotions and raises in other jobs. You'll negotiate those.
Yes.
You'll get more than $1,000. If you get just a little bit better at negotiating, you can imagine adding tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars to your lifetime earnings. Now, of course, it's not just about money. It's not just about negotiating with our jobs. We negotiate with customers and suppliers. We negotiate with our coworkers, with our spouses and children. All of these have better outcomes. So if you get just a little bit better at negotiating, you get huge compounding returns.
Yep.
And now I use negotiations because we can do the math really easily. If you got a little bit better at leading, it's not that someone says, oh, you're a slightly better leader, here's $1,000. But you're going to stand out on projects. You're going to get promoted faster. You'll get the job over other candidates, and you'll again get the compounding interest. Slightly better network brings more opportunities. Slightly better communicator, stand out in different ways. So really with any and all of these skills, getting just slightly better leads to a compounding effect throughout your career.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. When you take the long game lens, it really is a power law situation. You need to think long term to understand the benefit. Tell me, we just pulled a couple examples, networking and negotiation. We could start with those, but it really doesn't matter. What I'd love to hear you talk about is what is the process of that slightly better improvement versus the process of learning in an academic context as an engineer. We're very good at open the textbook, read, do some sample problems, learn in the lecture hall setting. But when you start to talk about networking or negotiation, it may not look the same. So how do we actually take these skills and build that 1% improvement and that mastery over time? What does that look like in comparison to our academic book smart days?
Great question, because it is a very different approach. How we have traditionally learned is memorization. Here's a formula, here's a quadratic equation, write it down, try it out. Great. I always know when to use a quadratic equation. It's very easy to spot.
Yeah.
I don't know when I'm going to use this leadership skill or when networking will come into effect. It's subtle, it's unclear. And so the way we need to learn this, it's not the way we've learned in school. It's more akin to how you would learn sports or music.
Yes.
We would never say to someone, hey, we're going to recruit you for our NBA team. Congratulations, you're on the team. I'm going to send you off to a 2-day basketball clinic. Okay, great. You had 2 days there. You're done for the season. You can go play every game. Nothing more for you to learn. That would be insane. What do we say? You have to practice with a team. You do drills. You do scrimmage. We're going to watch the tape. We're going to reflect. We're going to review. That's how we make you a better athlete. This is how we make you a better leader, a better communicator, a better negotiator, because there is no formula for leadership. There's no 3 bullet points for communication. So here is how you can get better. And when I say you, I mean your peers, your team, your organization. Create peer learning groups within your organization. I recommend groups of about 6 to 8 people, but there's ways you can scale it up. Create these groups, and there's some subtleties about you don't want people of different levels coming in, but you do want people from different departments. I've got this all written up on my website that you can download for free. So create these peer learning groups. Then you're going to take some content and discuss it. So you'll read a couple pages from my book. Yes, you can use my book, but if you don't want to use my book, read some pages from a different book, read some online articles, listen to a great podcast episode like this one. So you're all listening to some of these podcast episodes.
Exactly.
And now you come together to talk about it. Say, well, this was about leadership. Here's what I took from that show or that chapter. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to share your perspective, which is slightly different because these skills are subtle and situational. We're all going to get, say, oh, I never thought of it that way. And I don't necessarily agree with your model. Like, I don't like your model, but it's useful to know that's not how I'm going to lead, but I might recognize other people might be leading that way. And that's helpful to think of. That's why they're thinking of it that way. Then we're going to do things like, hey, here's a leadership challenge I have, or here's a negotiation challenge I have. And this is how we can scrimmage. Say, what do you guys think?
Yes.
You get to practice, because I can't go to my team and say, hey, I'm going to try leading differently this week. And when it's a complete disaster, halfway through, I go, no, time out. That doesn't count. Forget everything I said this week. There's no do-overs. But in this group, we can do these hypotheticals. You can even bring in case studies. They say, oh, let's go through this case study together. Let's practice it. Negotiations, lots of role-playing.
Yes.
We're going to try negotiating.
Yeah, let me build on this really quick, Mark, because I say this all the time, and I just want to highlight the sports metaphor is really powerful. But the one thing that's so different about our career versus being an athlete is when you're an athlete, you spend 90% of your time in practice, in scrimmage, in the gym with your trainers, and 10% of your time in the game when it actually counts, playing this finite game that has a start and an end, a winner and a loser right there in that moment. And then you come into your career and there's no practice at all. Maybe if you're lucky, you'll have a 10% time with your team or your boss or doing some training where you do get to practice, but 90% of the time, up to 100% of the time is game time. And by the way, there's no official start or end. It's just this infinite game, as Simon Sinek so eloquently talks about. The idea of intentionally carving out time to scrimmage, I love that word, or role play, practice, whatever word connects. I love this. And I'm a big, big proponent for people who make time for this, even if it's just a fraction of your week, have a massive advantage over people who are just constantly in the rat race of execution, never intentionally carving out time to learn and practice and discuss like this. So I love the model. Keep going. I just wanted to kind of double down on how important that is. And I see it with my clients. It's such a great discipline. I'm kind of feeling convicted myself right now. I need to continue in my own business to make that time and practice. But peer groups, read, discuss, scrimmage. What else is part of that learning cycle?
We can talk about other situations we've been in. I could say, hey, here's something I had a couple years ago. And we can reflect. That's watching the tape. That's going back and looking at what worked, what didn't. Now, we can do this. I'd recommend every 2 to 4 weeks. So an hour or two a month, and you're coming back doing this. Now, notice there's no real cost to this. You're investing some time. And yes, if you use a book, fine, you all bought the book. But again, doesn't cost anything to listen to these great podcast episodes or read some of the articles online.
Right.
So there's little or no cost. By doing this with your whole team, of course, you don't want to do this as a single team. You want to mix it up with other teams. By getting your whole team to do this with others, you have a number of benefits. First, you're upskilling your team. Great. Second, you're increasing engagement. And what we've seen the past few years, employees don't just want salary, don't just want to be paid. They want to know you care about them. You're helping them. This is going to increase your engagement and your retention. Third, you're fostering internal networks. I've been in so many companies where someone doesn't know what that coworker 30 feet away does. I don't even know his name. He's in a different department. I don't need to know him. So you're creating internal networks, which is really important for understanding the business and creating value. And fourth, you're creating a common framework. So if you've read a book like Good to Great, and you've all read it, you can say, hedgehog model. He goes, oh, I know exactly what you mean. You're right, hedgehog model. Got it. So you get these 4 benefits all for free. And by the way, this technique, I didn't just make this up out of whole cloth. This is how we've been teaching students at MIT for over 2 decades. This is how top business schools teach their students. This is a proven method that you can implement in your organization. And if your organization doesn't want to do this, again, you can download all this for free off my website. There's really no cost to implement. If they don't want to do this, go create a local meetup group. Get people from different companies. No one says you all have to be at the same company, and you can get the same benefits.
I love that comment. And just a reminder, don't let your organization be the barrier to your growth. If your leadership or your peer group does not want to participate in this, then go make it happen. Get resourceful, find people. But what I found, Mark, and I'm sure you've probably seen the same thing. It's like once you start doing this, people are attracted to it. They want to be a part of it because of all the benefits you just described. It's usually getting over the hump to simply commit the time and energy that first month or two, building the habit, creating space, you're making it a priority. When you already have 40, 50, 60 plus hours at the office and you're saying, well, Zach, you're telling me to create 2 more hours for this? How is that ever going to happen? And that's where the most resistance typically is found. But once you see the benefits, it becomes really easy to want to carve out more time.
But it's that compound interest. It's that, you're asking me to set aside $10 a week, but we know what happens when you do that over a lifetime.
Yes. Mark, I want to pull your expertise in one other area before we run out of time today related to the skills. So we just presented a really powerful and, to your point, proven, not just pulled out of the thin air, model for how to apply this into your career right now. But one of the things that also comes up a lot with engineering leaders who I engage with and who reach out for coaching is the question about career planning. Do I need a career plan? What is a career plan? My company has this template we need to fill out called a career compass or a career blueprint or career planning document or whatever. Is that what it is, or is it something else? And a lot of people feel confused. Then you go ask mentors or you listen to people tell their career story. Some of them will tell you they planned the whole thing, and others will tell you they never planned anything, and both of them made it to CTO. And it leaves us wondering, well, what should I do? Could you address the question of, what is a career plan? Who's it for? Where does that fit into our thinking about career success?
Our audience actually knows the answer to this. And it's true, some people have a plan and got to success, and some people got lucky. So let's ask the same question. Imagine your CEO comes to you and says, here is a really key project. You have to design this new product for us, and you've got a year. So you say, okay, great. I'll see you in a year. Just going to go lock myself in a room. I'm going to wing it. See you in a year. Let's hope we get there. That would be insane. Could you do it? Yeah, you could, but your odds of success go up so much if you actually have a plan. You create a project plan. Now, here's the thing we know about that project plan. First, it's going to get fuzzy. You might know what you're doing the first 30 days. Do you have any idea what you're doing on day 272 when you're starting? Of course not. You're not going to try to plan that detail. You'll say, well, look, we know we have to do integrations around month 10. So we can do testing in month 11. And so you come up with this general plan. You should have a clear idea what you're doing the next 3 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever.
Right.
It's fuzzier as you go out. Second, you're certain whatever you put down on paper is not how it's going to work out. It's going to change. You're going to find this was easier or harder, usually harder. You're going to have your CEO say, oh, by the way, change a plan 6 months in, and you have to add this constraint or do that. We know that happens, but we don't say, well, since it's going to change, let's not bother creating a plan. We create a plan that's clearer up front, fuzzier further out, and then we adjust as we go. Now, if you can't achieve a 12-month project without a plan, how the heck are you going to deal with a 20, 30, 40-year career without a plan?
Well
and
said.
while you can be successful, your odds go up greatly by having a plan. So it's the same thing. Think about, for me, what I say is, I want to be a CTO. I knew that early on, and I'm here. And there's a skills gap. No one is going to let me run a team of 200 people if I've never managed anyone. Before you can run a team of 200 people, you should be running a team of 100, 150 people. Before you can do that, you should be running a team of 60, 80 people.
Yeah.
And you can imagine these rungs and you can backtrack. Now, I gave size as an example. It's quantitative. We can do it. But it's all these other skill sets.
Absolutely.
And so think about, if I want to be here, just like in our projects, I want to deliver at 365 days, where do I need to be at these checkpoints along the way, and create the plan. And then what do I need to do to hit each of those milestones? It's something you've done before. Just apply those same skills to creating your career.
Mm-hmm. I know it's going to stir up a lot of questions for folks, but it's a really, really simple way to describe it. And I love that, Mark. I knew there's a reason I connected with you right away. I would have given the exact same answer. And the thing that I will add to that is sometimes I feel like we forget that we have this incredible set of skills as engineering leaders that help us at work. And many of them, when you take them and apply them into your life, like this example, building a career plan, can be extremely useful. And I see a lot of times where somebody's dealing with this gap or this problem in some area of their life. And it's like, hey, what if you simply took the thing you're great at doing over here and just move it into this other domain and apply it? It might be really helpful. So I think it's an important thing for all of us to remember. It's kind of the cross-functional skill set at work. Well, you're a cross-functional individual in your own life, and you can apply these things across different questions and domains. But on top of that, sometimes we get stuck in career planning because you create your own pressure for a necessary outcome by a certain timeline. And we beat ourselves up about, oh, my career plan was to be a director by now, and I haven't made my director promotion, and that makes me a bad engineer, and I'm a worthless person, and I'm not as good as so-and-so, and I'm comparing myself to everybody else who's had these results, and I didn't keep to my plan. And that self-esteem gets hit, and their confidence gets hit, and they take it on personally. because you didn't hit the plan. It's like, hold on a second. That wasn't the purpose of the plan, to create this massive wave of guilt and condemnation on you for missing a particular milestone. And I'm just curious for you, as you work with leaders and you see folks create plans, but maybe they miss the goals they set for themselves. What would you give someone as encouragement if they struggle with that kind of a mindset?
I'd say two things. First, let's go back to our projects. How often does a project wind up exactly as you planned it on day one? Near zero.
0 times for me, Mark. 0 times.
And often it's not the business saying, sometimes they say, oh, you missed a deadline, this is terrible. But often it's like, well, halfway through, you changed the project. I've been at companies that have done a pivot. So we totally missed that original goal because we don't even care about it anymore.
Yes.
But the company is better off in this new direction. The project's better off in this new direction. We consciously made the choices to head in a different direction, and we're happy with that. So if you said, I hope to be at this title at this time, you may have made choices where you said, to do that, I would have had to kiss the ring of this really annoying boss for 3 years, and I would not have been happy with myself. It was not worth it. I'll get promoted in 4 years instead of 3. I'll take a different path, but I will be happier. The other thing to remember is you might be on a project and the company might even cancel your whole project, not because your project's not working, but the company's larger goals say better ROI somewhere else. Good job, but we want to focus somewhere else. When I help people with career planning in chapter 1 of my book, and these questions are free on the website as well, I start with a series of about 20 questions. Very few of them are, how many hours a week do you want to work, or what is it you like to do? Many of the others are, how much time do you want to spend with your family? Where do you want to live? What type of impact do you want to have in the world? Because your career is not something you do in isolation. It's part of your life. And you're optimizing for happiness in life.
Yes.
Probably as an engineer, you're getting some happiness and satisfaction from your job, and the money helps. But you want to be happy in life. And if hitting some arbitrary career goal makes you miserable in life, but, oh, you got that director title, is that a worthwhile trade-off? Instead, you might have said, I want more time with my family. I want these other things, and I don't care about the title as much. So optimize for life happiness, not job titles.
Whew. Mark, you're speaking my language now. That's why this is the Happy Engineer podcast. And you and I have engineering degrees, mine in mechanical engineering. But now what I tell people is I'm focused on lifestyle engineering. And that's the name of our coaching program, is Lifestyle Engineering Blueprint. And just focusing on exactly what you said. You can achieve your goals at work and have the extraordinary success and impact that you want as an engineering leader without having to hate the journey. And in fact, it's not really what you want, to hate the journey and get to a title. You might think that's what you want, but it isn't. And I really, really love that idea of optimized around life happiness, not paychecks, titles, certain thing in the career domain. That's really powerful.
Even just use another analogy. We have the project triangle, cost, time, scope.
Yeah.
And of course, we can throw in quality or risk or other things. Well, you've got time, you've got scope, might be the goal, getting a certain set of skills to get that title. Cost is how much you're willing to spend, whether it's dollars for an MBA or time learning. But it's more than those three. We can put in that risk. We can put in that quality of life, not of work product. So recognize you're doing lots of different trade-offs, and that scope, that job title is one that you're good at understanding. How do you want to trade this off against the others? And it's okay to make those trade-offs.
I love it. Mark, where can the happy engineers out there go get a copy of your book and follow your amazing work? I know people are going to want to explore deeper. Tell us how we can connect with you.
You can go to my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com. There you can see where to buy the book, Amazon, elsewhere. You can follow me on social media, reach out with questions. I have a blog, so every week there's new articles, including the one I mentioned on why you shouldn't be worried about the layoffs. There's a whole page of free resources That includes the very first download on the resources page is how to create this peer learning program. Download it for free. I don't even ask for your email. There's a bunch of other free downloads. There's other books I recommend. And then there's the free companion app. And so we create an app called Brain Bump. It's linked from the website, but you can go to brainbumpapp.com. And this has the key tips from the book, as well as lots of other books, career books, leadership books, networking books, all this other content, because we know this isn't one and done. You don't learn it once and that's it.
Yes.
And so the app lets you either pull up information right as you need it. Oh, I need those networking tips right before I walk into the conference. Or it can be set so you get a daily reminder without even opening the app. And that's going to help you retain what you read. So it's a companion to the book. Brainbumpapp.com is where you can download the free app, and the careertoolkitbook.com is where you can learn more about the book.
Brilliant. And right in the show notes, we'll have links to get to everything that Mark just mentioned. So go click there and check it out. I've seen everything that you talked about, Mark, in preparation for meeting you today. And I'll just acknowledge some fantastic work, brilliant ideas, brilliant innovations, and so useful to complement. We invested a lot to get our engineering degrees. And if you want to get the ROI on that, you need to invest this time and energy into the career success toolkit and skill sets and mindsets to actually go and have the impact that you want and get the return in both compensation, but also return on and happiness for the career that you want to experience. And so I really, really love everything that you're doing. Mark, let's wrap it up. You know this as well as anybody, as a world-class engineering leader, as a CTO, and in the coaching that you do and the work that you do as an author, questions lead, the answers follow. And if the happy engineer wants better answers in their life, what would be the question that you would lead them with today?
I would think back to something I learned in chess camp years ago. I was a competitive chess player before I was a ballroom dancer, and I used to go to chess camp. Got strong nerd cred. And I remember one day we're sitting in the room and the instructor's giving us a position to look at, saying, what should white do in this position? We're all just looking. It wasn't clear. And he said, play a little fantasy chess. If you could change the board somehow, what would you do? And we all said, oh, move the knight on e7. Make that knight disappear, and it would be very easy to checkmate the opponent. I said, okay, well, now let's think about if our goal is to move the knight, what do we need to do it? And then took us 4 or 5 moves, but now we're a little more focused. As opposed to where there's a board and we want to checkmate the king, and I don't know, there's so many ways to go, but there's all these problems. And one of the things I learned to do was to ask if I could just make some change, just snap my fingers, something changes, what would change to make things better? Doesn't matter if it's realistic or not, but once you get to that, you look at the world differently, because so often we're looking forward. Well, I'm here. If it's in chess, well, I can do these moves and then my opponent does something, and then here's my second set of moves I can do. And so I'm looking forward, but of course there's so many possibilities, it's hard to focus. And so by looking backwards, by saying, if I could make that change, how do I work backwards to get there? Or in my career, given that I want to be a CTO, how do I work backwards to get the skills to get there? So ask yourself sometimes, forget about constraints. Engineers were always focused on the constraints. But if I had no constraints, if I could just make something change to make my life better, career, family, whatever, what would change? And then start working backwards from there.
I love it. I love it. If I could just snap my fingers and make that change, what would it be? Mark, thank you so much for your generosity today, just bringing so much wisdom and your story and the work that you're doing. Again, I want to acknowledge you. I love the book. I love where you've taken it with all the tools to support career engineering professionals, as well as any professional. Your work is great for anyone, so you don't have to be in engineering. But thanks again for being here, and this has been tremendous.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Hello, my friend. Zach White here again, and I wanted to let you know that's all we've got for this episode of the Happy Engineer podcast. Thank you so much for investing your time with me today. It is an absolute pleasure to be able to bring you this content. Just as a reminder, it would be amazing if you would subscribe and share this episode with any other engineers you know who may benefit from this. And if you're like me, I hope that you'll take some notes and, more importantly, take action. In our audio version of the podcast on Apple Podcasts and any place that you go to find podcasts, there's a little more content from me about this episode in the debrief. If you really want to hear about how to put this into action, I'd encourage you to go grab that. But thank you for joining us for the video version of our interview today. And again, can't thank you enough for helping us to get the word out about the Happy Engineer podcast and what we're doing. If there's any way we can serve you, would love to do that. Go find us at oasisofcourage.com or reach out to me on social media at Oasis of Courage. And don't forget again to subscribe and click the bell to have notifications of upcoming releases of new episodes of the podcast. As always, I want to leave you with this. If you stay in your comfort zone, you're not going to grow. So let's crush comfort, create courage, and let's do this.